So he became sick. There was a lot of sickness then. Krishna Balaram Temple was not built. There were huts in the back. There was no guest house. And so he became sick, and so I immediately stepped in. Prabhupada knew me from my service, and I had massaged Prabhupada on a few different occasions. Even in LA, when I was getting second initiation, Prabhupada let me massage him, and so he was familiar, and he liked my cooking, so I was on board. Then Srila Prabhupada got very sick, and Shruti Kirti was sick, so I was taking care of Prabhupada and massaging with talcum powder and bringing in minimal, like grape juice and things for Prabhupada. And I'd be up massaging, trying to massage his fingers to relieve some of the, discomfort that Prabhupada had. And so it was a difficult time. I was lying on the floor next to his bed, and he would call out when he had to go to the bathroom or when he was feeling discomfort. And yeah, so that was a difficult time, but it was very sweet being with Prabhupada. I mean, at that time in India, they would shut down the electricity at night to save energy. So the building would heat up, and Prabhupada would, then we would have to move, I would have to move Prabhupada out to the veranda. We had another mosquito net and bed out there, and I would walk him out because he was unstable at that time. I would walk him out, and I was hurrying to get all his pillows in right. And even Prabhupada was sick, and he said, "Just do it nicely." Even he was hardly talking, but he just wanted me to be very careful. So yeah, and during that time, actually, Jamuna was there, and I remember one time there was a room next to Prabhupada's where the servant would be. That room is no longer there. And Prishima came in one time, and Jamuna was with her. Prishima, as you know, is Prabhupada's sister. And at that time, Prabhupada was not well, and he also wanted to control what Prishima would bring him for food, because at one time, she said, Prabhupada could eat nails. Do not stop me from bringing Prabhupada. He could eat anything he wants. So she came in, and Shruti Kirti had been stopping, preventing her gently and carefully from bringing Prabhupada, because Prabhupada said, please don't let her bring her lunches there. I'm not feeling well. So she came in with Jamuna, and Jamuna was doing the translating, and Jamuna saying, she wants you to bring this into Prabhupada. Prabhupada likes you more than the other guy. So she was referring to Shruti Kirti. Prabhupada likes you more. So she was trying to play the angle of having me bring in the prasadam. So it was a little funny, and Jamuna and I were laughing over the incident. But so that went on for a couple of weeks, and then in the room next to Prabhupada, I caught malaria, and so they shifted me out to a hut in the back. Who happened to be there was Bardaraj with the Fate group. They were learning to make dioramas. And so I was in the back, and I was in the hut with Bardaraj. And it's a good thing because Rukmini came in to take care of him, and she saw I had 105 fever. She got quinine and some ice, and she probably saved my life. But so anyway, that went on. Shruti Kirti got better, Prabhupada got better, and then we came in to see Prabhupada as we all started to recover. And Prabhupada said, you two young Brahmin boys, go spend the day at the Jamuna. So we walked over to the Jamuna and covered our bodies in Jamuna mud and dried out in the sun. So very intimate and sweet, sleeping at the feet of Prabhupada and massaging him and cooking simple things for him. And, at night he would call out your name, and him as the Acharya on the Vyasa, and then him in this, frail state, and, you know, reaching out for some help. It was really tender. And, you know, when he would call out my name in the middle of the night to walk him to the bathroom, it, that that calling out has stuck with me for, you know, 40 years. So that was one time that I was with Prabhupada. And another time we were, oh, well, we'll talk about the Sringasan. The carver, if you've been to New Vrindavan, you see that the Sringasan now being used by Lord Jagannath, Lady Subhadra, and Balaram. That was originally the Radha Vrindavan Chandra Sringasan, and that was the first car Sringasan in the United States. And we put that mystery on the map, and he's done so many temples and elaborate things all over the world. So we sat and we worked out the details, and I brought the drawings to Srila Prabhupada and showed him. And he particularly liked, if you look, there are little panels that show the incarnations of Krishna on the Sringasan. If you look closely, small incarnation, Prabhupada liked that especially. So he was, you know, he was very appreciative. And then I had to actually smuggle the Sringasan out of India. At that time, to bring something out of India, you had to show money coming in to pay for it. The Reserve Bank would require documentation, but many of Kirtanand Swami's followers had paid for the Sringasan, so I had no money. So I had to learn the art of bribery in India. So I was feeling pretty confident that I was able to do that. And so when I showed Prabhupada the Sringasan, I was feeling excited because he was coming to New Vrindavan. And we had to get it there in time for him to be there for John Masmi. So Prabhupada smiled, and then he asked me, he looked up and asked me, he said, "How much did you pay for this?" And I told him the price, and he's smiling. Prabhupada looked at me and said, "You've paid too much." So I was a bit crestfallen. I was thinking I had done all of this work and smuggled it out of India and everything. So Prabhupada eventually came to New Vrindavan. The paint on the walls was drying as Prabhupada walked in the front door. Prabhupada said once that most of the temples, the paint smells very fresh when he gets there because the devotees are all preparing for him. So Prabhupada came in, saw Radha Damodar, paid his dandavats, and then he turned to me and said, "It was worth the price." So, and later on he said, when a thing is right, when the thing is of value and right, then you must pay the price, no problem. So it was a little lesson learned, and I went from the low to the high very quickly when Prabhupada said it was worth the price. So there are other events. I cooked for Prabhupada on a few occasions. When he'd come to New Vrindavan, we would always give him elaborate milk sweets, which he loved very much, and we would send them whenever he was in North America. And sometimes if we were traveling, we would bring our milk sweets, our sandesh, and he was always very appreciative of that. And and then we would send him Bridge Bossy spirits as well, and that he would see what's going on at New Vrindavan and getting.
Maybe you can explain what is the Bridge Bossy spirit.
The Bridge Bossy spirit was our own publication at New Vrindavan. It was like ditto sheets, back in the day, stories by devotees. It was one famous series called the Prashadamatic by Taru, and classes, and there would be excerpts from Kirtanand Swami's lectures, and Deep in the Woods from Bhavashat, taking care of the cows and the oxen. And so Prabhupada would comment on that. And so when he came to New Vrindavan, I would make him different preparations and what he liked. I one time made squash flower pakoras for which he liked very much. I made a subject with the squash and then the squash flower pakoras. But I guess my sweetest cooking experience with Prabhupada was, again, I was in Juhu doing business and with the carving and everything. Prabhupada was leaving the next day for the Kumbh Mela. And if you know how it would work, everyone would be, it was a very late night events in Juhu, and businessmen would come in and Prabhupada would be preaching to them. And there was not, the temple wasn't built at that time. There were apartments in the background, in the back of the Juhu complex. It took us years to get the inhabitants out. You know, there were legalities involved, and Prabhupada had a small apartment in those old apartments in the back. And so he had some businessmen up, and it was kind of late. And Prabhupada had asked me, can you cook me prasadam for the trip to the Kumbh Mela? Certainly, Prabhupada, I'll be glad to do that. And he was taking a long train ride the next day. So he's preaching to these gentlemen, and he looks at me and he said, you are cooking? And I said, well, Prabhupada, I was going to wait till late because your train rides in the morning, and but I got the message. He wanted me to start cooking. He wanted me to start cooking. And it's a very small apartment, so the kitchen's right next to where he's sitting with the businessman. So I go in and start cooking, and samosas and kachoris for the trip. How about Jayashri? And so Prabhupada, the businessmen finally end up, and Prabhupada smells the cooking going on, and he goes into his room and he said, I want to taste. So, and it's late at night, and and they've left. And so Harishori's packing up for the trip in the morning. So I bring in a kachori and 3 samosas. Now, my samosas are not like what usually I find in temples these days. Mine were more like a pastry. They were smaller and very flaky and very tasty, you know. So anyway, I brought in the kachori and a few samosas, and I went back to cooking because I had to cook for the party that we're traveling on the train. So when you cook for Prabhupada, then you kind of start looking at your watch to see. Malati might remember. The longer it's taking, the more you get excited because it means he's eating what you brought him. So I'm looking and I'm starting to smile, and then I'm kind of up and down because it's taking a while. So then the bell rings, and so I go in, Dandavats. I'm looking up and I look at his plate and it's completely empty. And Prabhupada looks at me and says, one more samosa, please. So, you know, to have Prabhupada eat 4 samosas at late at night was very sweet. And then he said that they were first class, and he said, this is the standards. This should be the standard for our cooking and our movement. So he said the same to Palika the next day. You know, when we were getting ready, he were coming down with all the suitcases, and he said in front of Palika, and she was laughing. He said, yes, his standard is our standard for samosas. So Prabhupada was always, you know, very kind to me. I mean, I had my chance, I had my opportunities to get chastised as well, but he was very kind to me. Anything you'd like to hear? I mean, we can talk a little bit about New VRndavan, or we can talk more about
The feet.
okay. So at New VRndavan, like we said, we had our mistri in India, and he would do carvings, but he would do a portion of a carving. We would take it, we would ship it back, and then they would cast pieces and put together the different aspects of the palace and all the altar. Those were all done in pieces. They, you know, not once we got the original carving pieces, then we would put it all together ourselves, casting it in various polymers and resin. So we had the idea that we would like for Guru Puj, we would like Srila Prabhupada's Lotus Feet. So I brought, I went up to New York, and it was the first time Prabhupada was going to, the time Prabhupada was going to have Rath Yatra down Fifth Avenue in New York. You know, it was a very glorious occasion. You know, I often think of Prabhupada on the boat coming to America, and all the sacrifice that he put on, and how Lord Nityananda blessed him. You know, the triumphant Prabhupada comes in a beggar, and he leaves North America as the Jagat Guru. And this you know, this award that he was given by Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda to come to the most important country in the world, the US, the most important city in the world, New York City, the most important street in the world at that time, Fifth Avenue. And Prabhupada was able to get on the cart and bring Rath Yatra down Fifth Avenue. It was just a wonderful experience. So before he was, so I showed up and asked Prabhupada, Prabhupada, I brought some clay from VRndavan. Can we take prints of your feet? And Prabhupada said yes, and he was always, like I say, kind to me. So I opened the briefcase, and there was a slab of clay in the briefcase. I took it out, I dusted it lightly with powder, and I said, Prabhupada, please, and I, you know, held my hand, and Prabhupada to him, and he stepped up on the clay. And then he stepped back, and I dusted his feet, and then I looked at the clay, and I couldn't see anything. And I'm like, I saw Prabhupada get on the clay. And I'm like, what is this, some kind of Narada Muni pastime where he's not really touching the ground? But, you know, being at VRndavan, you think a lot more practically. And I realized that the clay was just too hard for Prabhupada's soft lotus feet. So I said, well, Prabhupada, please let me soften the clay. And Prabhupada said, okay, I'm going to take prasadam, and then before I go to the carts. So Prabhupada went to take prasadam. I went out with Sudhanu. We added water. So we softened the clay. I brought it back in, covered it with the powder again. Prabhupada had just finished lunch. And I said, please, Prabhupada. He stepped on the clay. This time, I pushed his feet gently into the clay. Then I pressed each toe firmly into the clay. And then I said, thank you, Srila Prabhupada. He stepped off. I dusted off his feet. He got on his chata, and he walked down to Fifth Avenue to get on the Rath Yatra. So that clay imprint of Prabhupada's feet is the original. That powder on the clay is the dust from Prabhupada's feet, actual. And that slab is in Prabhupada's palace under glass for everyone to see. I sometimes wish I'd have kept a little bit of that powder, but wasn't able to do it at the time. So that we then would make cast pieces of that from that mold, from that original piece, and we would send them to temples. And most temples you would see would have that cast piece at the at the foot of the Vyasa, accepting the flowers on Prabhupada during Vyasa Puja ceremonies for Srila Prabhupada. So that was Prabhupada's lotus feet. There was a time when we had begun construction on the palace, and there was a quarantine at VRndavan at that time. But I was in India doing, you know, what I was doing with carving and importing things for VRndavan. So I was not quarantined at that time, but I had the plans for Prabhupada, the rough plans.
Maybe you can explain why the quarantine, because right now quarantine means COVID. So maybe.
Yeah. Well, one of my best friends, Sudhanu, he and Soma had spent time in India with the carvers, learning carving and doing those things. So he came back with, I'm trying to remember which disease he had. He brought,
Hepatitis.
oh yeah, he brought back hepatitis, and we were unaware, of course. And again, I was in India, so I missed it. And New Vrindavan, there was a college group that came from one of the colleges, and some of the students got hepatitis, and the teacher got hepatitis, so they closed down New Vrindavan. It was totally locked down, quarantine. I remember my wife Katila was there, and her mother. It made the news, and her mother, who lived in Pittsburgh, wanted to come down and see her, and they wouldn't let her into the community. So anyway, Prabhupada was then in Mayapur, and I brought the drawings to Srila Prabhupada to show him the early drawings of Prabhupada's palace. And so we were out on the veranda showing him the drawings. And Prabhupada said, all over the world, uh, my devotees are building temples for Krishna. He said, in New Vrindavan, you are building me a palace. He said, very nice, thank you very much. So we got the blessings. And, when Prabhupada visited again in 76, he did a tour of the palace and was asking questions, and he was encouraging us. Interestingly enough, when we talk about when Prabhupada was in his last days, um, there'll be a little reference, a little pastime to talk about that as well. So those are some of the experiences. Now there are some lighter experiences. Shruti Kirti and I had similar experiences. Like once massaging Prabhupada in Vrindavan, we're under the mosquito net in Prabhupada's large bed, massaging his back, and there was a mosquito that got in under the net. So I went to grab the mosquito, and Prabhupada said, no, stop. So I'm thinking, oh, Prabhupada is seeing even the mosquitoes as inhabitants of Vrindavan and, liberated souls, whatever. So I went back to massaging. And then I saw the mosquito land on Prabhupada's knee. Prabhupada whisked it away, and he said, he has attacked me. Now you may get him. So a little bit of a lesson to be learned there. In so many ways. In any case, I got the mosquito and kept massaging Srila Prabhupada. So there's little sweet little events that occurred as well. What else can I say? I mean, the going to Juhu in 77. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Prabhupada had just come back from the UK, and they had some medical treatment, and Prabhupada was ill. And so it was a difficult time. And Tamal Krishna knew I was, sorry, I'm trying to check my notes here. He knew that I had served Prabhupada in the past, so he was immediately grabbed me and asked me to be part of the team. But before we talk about that, I'd like maybe talk a little bit about some of the New Vrindavan pastimes. I don't know if you have Radhanath Swami disciples on the group, but Radhanath Swami and we had some pastimes together. I also was his first temple president, for better or for worse. He was always my exalted, at his feet. We were the cowherd boys of New Vrindavan. We had, a dozen, I don't even remember how many cows at that time, but Radhanath Swami would come down from Vrindavan, and it would be me, Taru, Sudanu, and Radhanath Swami and we had very large cows who gave tons of milk. So Radhanath Swami and I had the largest cows. I was, very athletic. I was strong. Radhanath was surprisingly strong. In fact, he doesn't like when I tell people that, but that's a fact. He's a good wrestler too. I will tell you, we had that pastime. So
Keep going.
it was the Rasta Lila night, and at VRndavan, when we had these events, we would cook these elaborate, and when I mean elaborate, it was extraordinarily elaborate, 108 preparations at least. And we would cover the altar, and for the last darshan, the devotees would see that. And they would make like 20 gallons of sweet rice, the rich cow, and we put it in the creek to stay nice and cold overnight and leave it open with the screen so Radha and Krishna during the Rasa dance could enjoy the sweet rice and the sweets. So at VRndavan, our breakfast was oat water. But what made it reasonable is we got the Mahaprasadam from Radhavadavan Chandra. And at that time, we would do 50, every lunch would have 50 preparations. And the mood was we'd become austere and elaborately serve the deities to get their mercy. And so that morning Mahaprasadam distribution with the oat water is what kept us going. So the devotees saw this elaborate, the whole altar was filled, all shelves, everything. And so they were thinking, okay, the next morning after Radha and Krishna enjoy the Rasa dance, we'll have enormous plates of Mahaprasadam and huge amounts of sweet rice. Well, the cowherd boys actually were pretty notorious and cantankerous. Even though I was a temple president, and get blamed for it, I think we're all kind of characters. So we would be out milking the cows very early in the morning, during the morning program, sometimes depending on the cycle, milking the cows before Mangalarti even. But this time we were milking them during the morning program. My wife was in charge of the deity worship on doing the transfers and the outfits and everything. It was in the small Bahulaban temple. And so when the plates come off, she would organize all the maha for the devotees. Well, as it would have it, the cowherd boys came to me and said, we need to get some of that Mahaprasad. We're going to be milking the cows. We don't know if we're going to get our fair share of the maha. We need to do something. So my wife was in the Pujari room. So I went to no one else but Radhanath Swami. He was not Radhanath Swami at that time. He was known by us as the Baba, the Babaji of VRndavan. So I said, Radhanath Swami, I'm your temple president. We're all laughing hysterically because, that didn't mean anything in the barn. And I said, go to my wife and tell her you need a big tray of Mahaprasadam. He has something he needs to have put aside. So he said, well, you're my temple president. I have to do what you say. So he went there, got a huge tray of Mahaprasadam. Okay. She's like looking at him like, what's going on? Well, your husband, Kuladri's the president. He told me to come. She goes, okay, but she was suspicious. In the meantime, I sent Taru out to the creek and he got a bucket of sweet rice. So they bring them back to the barn and we're still milking the cows. In the meantime, breakfast is being served over at the temple. So they bring out the Mahaprasadam and there was a bit of complaining. Where's all the maha? We saw the maha last night. Who's got all the maha? And then when they brought in the bucket of sweet rice, they're going, wait, there was a lot more sweet rice than this. Where's the sweet rice? So we had to look out at the barn, looking out over at the temple to be sure, because we were still finished milking the cows. And all of a sudden we saw a few of the men coming from the prasadam room headed to the barn. So we had the maha stashed in the corn silo and the sweet rice was in a big bucket and we didn't know where we were going to hide that. So at the last minute, we put it under a cow and Radhanath Swami and I were pretending to milk the cow to hide the sweet rice. So when the crowd came in, they weren't carrying torches at the time, But when they came in and started asking, because they suspected right away, they knew where it went. We all played dumb. They didn't notice that we were pretending to milk the cow, and it was a big bucket of sweet rice. And so that was considered the big heist of New Vrindavan, where Radhanath Swami was implicated in the major heist of the Mahaprasad. So we all enjoyed the Maha and the sweet rice quite a bit when the coast was clear. So those were some of the shenanigans. I remember Prabhupada allowed me to bring back the first shalagrams to the US. It was in Mayapur, and Prabhupada gave permission. He said, spend time with Jananivas and learn the mantras. And we obtained 2 shalagrams, Hiranyagarbha and Sudarshan Chakra. They were in the shape, one was in the shape of chakra, and Hiranyagarbha's egg-shaped shalagram. So I spent some time, a couple of weeks learning it, and I came back to New Vrindavan. And one of the shalagrams was going to go up to the Vrindavan farm. So Radhanath Swami would come down during the day, and I would show him the procedures for shalagram puja, which were quite elaborate. We had our own little altar in the back in a marble room. And so he would learn them. And in between, when I said before that Radhanath Swami was a good wrestler, that in between our pujas and waiting for the next offering, because we would offer 8 times a day, we would do some wrestling exercises in the pujari room, which my wife did not appreciate very much, but Radhanath Maharaj was quite strong, milking cows and wrestling in the back room in New Vrindavan. And by the way, when I actually showed Radhanath Swami how to make sandesh originally, of course, he took it to a new level. And the key to good sandesh is the kneading process. The more you knead it, the smoother and the silkier it gets. And the ratio of sugar is very important. And Prabhupada once said sandesh is like medicine. So he would take it. And Radhanath made such wonderful sandesh, and we'd send it all over the world for Prabhupada. I got more, but any questions, comments? Maybe Malta, you might have.
Well, didn't you one time bring some ice cream from New Vrindavan to Srila Prabhupada?
Well, yeah, we would pack ice cream in dry ice and bring it to Prabhupada anywhere in the world. And that's in the final pastime, just days before Prabhupada left the planet, actually. So I can tell that story. So in Juhu, Prabhupada was ill, and so I was part of the team. It was Abhiram, Tamal Krishna, and myself. I had the night shift. I would be from like, I don't know, 9, 10 o'clock till 4 or 5 in the morning. I would be with Prabhupada. And then sometimes during the day. Prabhupada was having Horlicks. Those of you in India know what that's like, a health drink. Horlicks with milk, a hot milk, and he would have grape juice. That's all Prabhupada was taking at the time. So I would be with him, and again, massaging with talcum to try and relieve the feeling. And then Prabhupada called all the seniors who were there, the GBCs and the sannyasis, and I was, in that. And Prabhupada said that discussion, that classic discussion, well, what shall we do? And the common request was, Prabhupada, let us take you to the best doctors in the world. We'll find a way. We need you to lead us, Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. We need you to lead us. And because the discussion was, shall we do that, or shall I go to Vrindavan? Is it time for me to head to Vrindavan? So that discussion was going on, and the majority wanted to oh yeah, ice cream too. Yeah. Someone in the chat was pointing out that Rodnath had certain ailments at the time, but that didn't stop him from enjoying the heist. But so um, so it was a very serious time, and the majority went, let's try Prabhupada. We'll take you, we'll rent private plane. We'll take you to the best doctors in the world, and we'll try to, get through this. And so they all walked out, and Prabhupada, I was on duty at that time, and Prabhupada said, Kuladri, what do you think? And I said, Srila Prabhupada, I'm, I'm an intruder here. I know, I don't, but you're asking me, so it seems to me that if you're waiting for Krishna to decide what you should do, best place to wait would be in Vrindavan. Prabhupada nodded his head and said, thank you. So the next day, basically, Prabhupada said, I've decided to put myself in the hands of Krishna and Balaram, not the doctors. So we made the arrangement to take him on the train from Juhu to Mathura, and then from Mathura to Vrindavan. And there were, I forget, a couple sannyasis, Tamal Krishna, Abhiram, and myself caring for Prabhupada on the train. So we finally got Srila Prabhupada to Vrindavan, and one of the Ayurvedic doctors came in, and he was suggesting maybe try to give Prabhupada some mung water. He needs strength, and you need to give him something. So I tried making mung water along with the Horlicks and other things. And actually, at that time, there were very few of us in Vrindavan. And Bhakti True Swami showed up. He was not a Swami at the time. That's the first time I met him. And so together we were in the kitchen trying to make this, trying to do what the doctor had suggested, the Kaviraj had suggested. So, but Prabhupada, it was not going to be, Tamal Krishna was, it'll be some miracle if you two can cook and Prabhupada can recover. But there were no miracles in that sense. And we didn't. So I had been with Prabhupada now for a month from Juhu and in Vrindavan. And then Kirtananda Swami arrived from New Vrindavan. And we would always bring Prabhupada gifts. We'd bring him, boga, sweets, and thing, and we would bring him ice cream. That's where the ice cream came in. So there's a pastime in Satrup Maharaj's book about everything. We brought gifts, and Prabhupada, there was jewelry, and Prabhupada said, but there is no wife, give it to the deities. And then the heavy time. So Srila Prabhupada, we were praying, to Krishna, and then Kirtananda said, Prabhupada, if you pray to Krishna to let you stay, then Krishna has to answer your prayers. And Prabhupada nodded like, okay. But so it was becoming more and more serious. And Kirtananda had brought, along with the gifts, some mango ice cream from New Vrindavan. And so I was one of Prabhupada's servants at the time. And so I said, Srila Prabhupada, I'd like to give you some ice cream. And there were, Prabhupada was then at that point never alone. There were senior people all around. So Prabhupada was propped up. I took a little bit, half of this teaspoon of mango ice cream and put it to Prabhupada's lips. And Prabhupada took just a tiny touch of that mango ice cream. I believe that was the last sweet that Prabhupada had on the planet during his pastimes. And then Kirtananda was praying, Prabhupada, please, we're building you a palace. Come and stay in your palace, finish your writing, direct us from Prabhupada's palace. Prabhupada said, let us see which palace Krishna sends me to. So those were some of the last pastimes with Srila Prabhupada in Vrindavan. So, what to say about Prabhupada? You know, the founder Acharya, his extraordinary place. Uh, my my children are all over. I have a couple doctors, and you know, my son's a cardiologist, and he married a surgeon. My daughter has got her master's, and she's a nurse practitioner. Her husband's an ER doctor. Um, my other daughter's got a master's in public health. So I have all of my children are college grads and are professionals, and so you know, they respect Krishna consciousness, but they're not practicing devotees. So, but they respect, they love prasadam, and every time we have, my wife and I cook for appearance days and festivals, they're eager to come and honor prasadam. So, but they keep their distance from ISKCON. They have their professional lives, and so I was visiting my daughter. She's an executive assistant to the owner of a hedge fund, financial advisor, big company in Manhattan. And I took a walk, and I would recommend this for anyone. To think of Prabhupada getting off the boat at his age was nothing. I mean, just nothing. Walking in Manhattan on the Lower East Side, it was bitter cold when I was taking the walk. And I would recommend anyone to do that. Take a walk on the Lower East Side when it's frigid cold winter and experience Prabhupada walking there, this, you know, extraordinary Vaishnav. No, you know, he sacrificed himself, you know, on the boat and getting the heart attacks. Um, you know, he placed himself on the altar of sacrifice. And Lord Nityananda, please come, you know, and he emptied himself of any, you know, he often talked to echo, you know, one must be fixed, their purpose must be one. Um, and he filled himself with that request of his spiritual master, emptied himself of any other self-interest, including his health and welfare. And at that old age, he took that boat, had his heart attacks, and you know, as some say, he became Sakta Vishavatar. He became an empowered individual because of his frailty and nothing, and to do what he did, um, we can never estimate. What did we say? He left. You know the story about Sumati Maraji. She did not want to put him on the boat. She said, "I will be blamed because this old man will not be able to make this trip. He will not be able to endure." It's not that she was concerned about the passage or payment or anything. She was worried about Prabhupada's health, but he wouldn't be deterred. And so, you know, he did what, you know, what, no, he was like worth a million Jagat Gurus. He left and he spread the holy name. He spread Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita all over the world, empowered by, some say by Lord Nityananda personally. He became the empowered embodiment, personification of Lord Nityananda, spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. And so when we look in our Guru Varga, the eminent position he had, and the vision that Bhakti Vinod Thakur shared with the world of what would happen, and then that message being being distributed by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta, picking out Prabhupada and giving him that instruction, and then Prabhupada making that vision a reality. So he's our founder acharya of our own branch of the Lord Chaitanya's divine tree, Sankirtan tree. So we were fortunate, Malti, so fortunate to get Prabhupada's personal association for so much. I had little bits here and there. And so that in your heart, whatever has brought you to Krishna consciousness, with a sincere heart, somehow or other you'll get through. I mean, my wife and I walked away from our lives, and we were, we put our parents through difficulties we didn't have to. We were extreme and immature and went through so many changes at VRndavan and other places. But whatever that sincerity that brought you in, that Brahman, the Brahmatekon, that seed that you get after traveling universe to universe, lifetime to lifetime, they come in contact with the Krishna consciousness movement and our Guru Varga. I mean, you have to keep that and water that sincerity of the heart, so that when their challenges come, and they come all the time, you stay rightly situated under the mercy of Guru and Krishna. What else? What else should we talk about?
Hare Krishna, my name is Lalita Prasad. Yeah, there's a lot of discussions, regarding Prabhupada's suffering that he did not suffer. I was in Vrindavan in '76, and I remember, I'll just stay on your right lane. I remember, viewing him from the room that I stayed in. There was a small window, and I could see him laying on his veranda, on his bed, on his beer, and he was uncomfortable, So, some younger devotees will say, "Oh yeah, but he didn't really feel anything. He's transcendental." Haridas Thakur is a good example of Prabhupada. What Prabhupada went through. So basically, Prabhupada did not suffer. And, that kind of bothers me because to me, he did. I mean, and to me, he felt just like with Christ, he felt everything as a human being feels. And the heart attacks, he felt the heart attacks. He felt the cold in the streets of New York. He felt, so I'm a little resistant, when the devotees say, "Oh yeah, he didn't feel anything, he's transcendental." What's your take on that? You were there with it.
Well, what he felt is not of this world. To try and our senses are blunt material senses. So when we perceive what is pleasure, what is pain, or we try to understand with our senses what the spiritual master is going through, we're not on that platform to understand that. But to think that he doesn't have to accept the sins of his disciples and it doesn't cause him distress and suffering in an extraordinary manner. Having 5,000, 10,000 disciples and accepting their sinful reaction, how do we gauge what he had to go through for that? There's no way for us to comprehend that experience. But to say that he didn't experience it, is immature, and I think is inaccurate. He's accepted that, and he's accepted that as his duty to his spiritual master and to his disciples. I mean, Prabhupada didn't have to take disciples. I mean, he could have written his books, he could have taken disciples, but he didn't have to start ISKCON, this whole organization. I mean, but he did that on the order of his spiritual masters. So to accept those, he could have stayed in Vrindavan and written, taken a few disciples. I mean, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, how many disciples did he have? 5. Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So to think that Prabhupada didn't offer himself in full sacrifice and giving up everything is not the way to think of it. Incorrect, inaccurate. Not only that, but we should appreciate what he did and not minimize it.
Thank you very much, Hare Krishna. Yes, when you come to Cincinnati, maybe you can make some of those nice sweets for the students here when I take you to their houses. I'm only kidding, but it will be nice to taste. You're making me hungry, so thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Great story. Thank you. Hare Bol.
There's like 2 minutes left. Does anybody else have any questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dhanwad Pranam.
Hare Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. My name is Sundar Haridas. I got a quick question, Prabhu. What is the date you took the footprints of Srila Prabhupada?
Well, I'm trying to remember, but I believe the Rath Yatra in New York was in 76. So whenever that date, we can look it up. I'm not good with dates, but we can look it up. And so it was the same day as the Fifth Avenue Rath Yatra, where he got blessed and rewarded for his, I mean, he was so triumphant sitting on the Roth carts coming down Fifth Avenue. Quite extraordinary.
Yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji,
Hello, young man.
Hare Krishna, I have a question. What
Yes.
does your name mean?
My name?
Yeah.
I've heard a couple different things. You know, some of the basis of it, some talk about Kula being family, you know, village, family oriented. There are others that talk about mountains. It could be related to Govardhan. The Kula is referred to some of the mountains of India. So I never really had an understanding of what Kuladri means. Kuladri Das means buffoon in many languages. But Kuladri, I'm not really sure what the Sanskrit is. Nice question, though. Thanks for asking.
This,
Thank you. Hare
this,
Krishna.
this young fellow, he is has his own YouTube channel, and he gives very adequate, knowledgeable Srimad Bhagavatam classes and other classes. Because he's
Well, maybe you can do the research. Let me know what my name means. What do you think?
I'll try.
I could use all the help I can get. All right, well, thank you all for putting up with me. Thank you, Malati, for embarrassing me.
No embarrassment. It's actually, now I'm thinking, what's next?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kuladri.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for your association.
Best wishes for your preaching on the front lines in Columbus.
So there are
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare
Dhanwad
Krishna,
Pranam.
Prabhuji.
This one, I think we can.
Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
there's devotees here from